Good afternoon, everybody. So, potentially a historic weekend for Michael Schumacher, closing in on his 5th world title. But it's also for Frenchman Jean Todt as well, who's been in charge at Ferrari now for 9 years. As we look down into the Renault garage, look at Jenson Button, whose future is the subject of much speculation at the moment, expecting the Renault team to announce at 4 o'clock this afternoon that he will not be driving for the team in 2003, which I think is a real shame. He's going to be replaced by Fernando Alonso, but many people would say that engineers up and down the pit lane and team principals, that Button is a better driver than Jarno Trulli, and yet it's Trulli that's staying and Button that's going, and we'll have much more on that in tomorrow's programme as you can get. So Jean Todt looking for his 50th victory in charge of the Ferrari team. Schumacher looking for his 5th world title as the Rinaldi Arrows goes out on track. Now, we haven't seen much of this car so far this weekend. In fact, only one installation lap this morning, and that's because Tom Walkinshaw, the team principal of the Arrows team, is trying to sort out some difficulties with major investor Morgan Grenfell back in England, and at the moment Tom seems to think that he doesn't want his cars to run while these negotiations are going on.
Seems to be a bit of a Mexican standoff, doesn't it, in terms of clearly we understand there's some deals on the table, and it's bizarre really to see a Grand Prix team here, especially a car that's going very well, good engine, driver of the quality of Frentzen in the sister car to Benaldi here, you're seeing on track. My understanding or our belief is that they're going to do very little running even in this qualifying session, James, and will almost certainly be outside of the 107% rule if that's the case, and will not start tomorrow's race if that is indeed their strategy. But it's bizarre to see, and it's a crying shame, isn't it, to see such a good car. It's been really going well, this car, really sitting there with nothing to do, and the driver's almost sort of playing the role of the substitute, sitting on the bench at a football match.
You will recall, if you watched the programme at Silverstone, Max Mosley, the president of the FIA, telling Ted Kravitz in an interview that what he would consider the minimum participation in a Grand Prix would be a lap of qualifying, and that would appear to be what the Arrows team are doing, possibly just a single lap of qualifying to show that they came to the Grand Prix, they did go out and attempted to take part in it, and if they do that, then they won't be considered to have withdrawn from Formula One, and that's obviously the point at which the value of the team drops right away, because the team will no longer basically have an entry in Formula One if it doesn't come to the Grand Prix and compete. If it misses 2 Grand Prix, they're out, and a team which potentially on paper could be worth as much as £100 million would have an asset value of absolutely nothing, because they would be out of the Formula One circus.
That indeed, I think, is the threat. So quite clearly some heavy negotiations got to go on there, although Benaldi reasonably quick, it has to be said, down to the Adelaide hairpin, just over a second from the ultimate pace that Michael Schumacher was setting this morning in that first sector, and teammate Frentzen 3/10 faster than that even. So they're certainly not swanning around the racetrack, and actually a pretty solid first lap for them both, considering they haven't driven in anger at all this weekend.
Well, the amazing thing is that all the other teams have been out all weekend running, as you say, in the dry. Yes, Martin?
And now he's coasting, James. Now, having done that sort of solid run down to the first hairpin, as expected, coasting and coming in the pits.
Oh, it must break his heart, mustn't it? No, he's not.
I know, he was just coasting. He didn't take the pit lane entry there is pretty much the same line as the last corner, but just obviously making sure he doesn't do a fast time.
I think he must be have been under instructions. He must have misunderstood the instructions, because here comes Frentzen through now, and he's going to cut the tape at 1:18.497, and that's well, it's 6 seconds off the pace of Michael Schumacher. So they're playing some sort of game out there. One wonders whether the Arrows management want to sort of play hardball, possibly with the bankers back in England, saying, look, you know, we're not going to come out here and make an effort. We're just going to tread water until you come and make a decision on what you want to do with this team.
Yeah, I think it's just keeping the ball up in the air, isn't it, for them? As you said, if they lose their Grand Prix travel rights and all the other income rights that we heard David Richards talking about, can be millions and even tens of millions. If they lose that kind of income, then I don't think Tom would have that kind of demeanour at all. But Tom's a racer at the end of the day, and I really feel most sorry for the drivers, actually, having to coast in and park a perfectly healthy Formula One car. Just as you think you've seen everything in Formula One, something else comes up that completely amazes you?
Personally, I feel sorry for the mechanics. They must be wondering where their next paycheck's coming from. Do they need to go and look for another job? I know one of the truckies down at Arrows is planning on getting married next year to one of the girls that runs the Honda motorhome, and they're really going through a tough time at the moment, wondering where the money's going to be coming from. Anyway, here's Takuma Sato out on track. He is doing representative lap times, and this is the only Jordan you're going to see today, because Giancarlo Fisichella will definitely not be qualifying. He had a huge shunt, and Salo certainly gets the back out there. Fisichella had a huge shunt this morning, went head-on into the tyre barriers on the outside of the long first corner at Estoril, and had suffered some memory loss and some concussion. Professor Sidney Watkins, the Formula 1 medical delegate, said, we don't think you're fit to run, son. You need to take the afternoon off. He may appear tomorrow. We'll have to find out, but it was a horrible accident. You saw it in the build-up to the programme. And what in fact happened was that he lost it in the fast chicane as Sato cuts the tape at 1:14.185, which is some way off the pace that we can expect to see a little bit later in the afternoon. Fisichella damaged the front wing the lap before, and literally as it went for the first time under a heavy load into that long right-hander, it snapped off. So it wasn't contact with the curbs, according to the team. It was definitely that he damaged it the lap before.
Ted Kravitz is down in the pits.
Martin, down at Arrows, it's a very awful situation. Enrique Benoldi and Heinz-Harald Frenz have just taken the steering wheels off the cars. They're getting out. They're going to take no more part in this. I'll tell you what the real shame is that it's all these guys are racers, from the mechanics to the engineers to the drivers themselves. They're all racers. They all feel it in their heart. And to be involved in such a sham like this, where they just have to go around, make sure they're not within 107% so that they don't have to race tomorrow for whatever reason, financial reason, it's just a shame. Anyway, they're out of the car. It's no use to them. They're just not going to take any more part in this session.
And watching Jung over the line, he goes second. But still, again, a very slow time there, 1:17.3. Pole position, surely he'll be buried down there in the 1:12s. And the Ferrari's looking pretty awesome this morning, as ever, glued to the racetrack, looking like slot cars they were going around here this morning, and looking supremely fast. But it does appear that the Michelin runners, of which the Minardi is one of them, do have a good qualifying tyre, so we can still expect some fireworks from Williams and McLaren to stop this man, Michael Schumacher, being on pole position. So can Montoya do it one more time and surprise everybody? I think that'll be his 5th consecutive pole. I think that the Ferrari drivers were sleeping a little bit in Silverstone. I think they thought they had the front row well and truly locked up. Montoya goes out and finds 9/10 of a second from nowhere and blows them off the front row. And I think they'll be somewhat more alert this afternoon.
Paul Stoddart there, watching on the timing screens as his Australian driver, Mark Webber, goes around the track. Webber won here last year in Formula 3000. Very competitive indeed. And obviously at the moment he's driving the Minardi this morning. He was 19th fastest, but that was because Benoldi and Frentzen only did those two very slow sighter laps. So Minardi very much at the back of the grid here once again this weekend. And a lot of speculation about Webber's future next year, possibility that he might go to Jaguar. Obviously did a test for them a couple of weeks ago, which went well. And if Jenson Button doesn't take the offer that Jaguar have made him, then Webber's certainly a strong candidate to go to Jaguar. And my hunch is that having seen the performance of the Jaguar at Silverstone with this supposed revised package that they had on board and how uncompetitive it was, that Jenson will decide not to take up the Jaguar option. So we may well see this fella in a green car next year.
Yeah, I think he will be almost as disappointed as Jenson Button about the decision we're expecting from Renault this afternoon to announce Alonso joining the team. Webber, of course, another driver contracted to Flavio Briatore, the Renault boss, and a man that probably had an outside chance of stepping in that works Renault himself, and he therefore will still be out there trying to find a better funded drive than he's got at the moment, as Rubens Barrichello attacks the first sector of this lap. If he gets down to the end in sub 25 seconds coming into Adelaide hairpin, then he'll be already on a very hot lap. Coming towards that timing zone now, let's have a look at it, and it is indeed sub 25 seconds. So Barrichello then finding a lot of speed and grip instantly.
Well, the track temperature is creeping up all the time, and that's really the secret around Magny-Cours. It's 46 degrees at the moment, There's huge disparity between the air temperature and the track temperature at Magny-Cours. The air temperature only 27 degrees. It's a very funny place, this. The asphalt, the bitumen in the tarmac, the hotter it gets, the less grippy it gets. It's the only track like that in the world. Barrichello now 0.8 of a second faster than Takuma Sato. And yeah, literally, the hotter it gets, the less grippy it gets. And rubber, whereas most racetracks we go to, you know, you hear about drivers talking about rubbering in, and the more rubber goes down, the faster it gets. This place, the rubber simply doesn't stick as it gets hotter. It's also the only track in the world where you cross the start-finish line in first gear. That's exactly what Barrichello's just done, and he does a 1:13.058, which is half a second quicker than he managed this morning.
Yeah, solid first run then for Barrichello. I imagine he would have expected and hoped to be in the 1:12, so probably slightly disappointed as he's going around there. But this track, James, you wind up, it's just every corner exit is the next corner entry. Even your VMAX, your top speed down the back straight, is totally dependent on how your car exits Estoril corner some half a mile earlier. And therefore, if you've got the grip, you can just wind up like a spring, and if you haven't, you're hopelessly out of kilter on the way into most of the corners, and you start fighting the car, and the time just ebbs away very quickly. That's a very good first lap from Eddie Irvine. He'll be pleased with that, straight down into the 1:13s, and we have to say that Jaguar's had a much better showing here than Silverstone. They said in Silverstone it was wet, dry all weekend. We never really got a clean run at setting this new package up, so let's hope they were right.
Well, let's hope they were right, because certainly Irvine was in the top 6 yesterday in free practice. We're riding, though, with Jarno Trulli, the man who has got a secure contract with Renault for 2003. And the way that team is progressing, it looks like a good place to be for 2003.
Down into the Imola chicane then. That's seen some huge crashes over the years, but the cars are working so well now. We very rarely see them going off on the outside, but so often you'd sweep into that right-hander and never turn left and just go smashing into the barriers. But now they seem to have a better balance and more control over them. And there's that new strip of green tarmac on the outside. There used to be gravel in there, and it's enabling the drivers to get on the power and take a wider line much earlier, which is why I'm really expecting last year's pole position time of 1:12.9 to be smashed, really, because the track is faster, and as we know at every other circuit so far this year, the cars are faster too.
So far, we've had 6 competitive times, and everybody has gone about half a second quicker than they managed this morning. Now, Michael Schumacher was fastest this morning on a 1:12.9, so if he manages to go half a second quicker, it'll put him on a 12.4. But we think there is more speed in the track than that. There's certainly more speed in everybody that's been out so far. It's just been their banker lap, if you like. We've got Barrichello fastest ahead of Trulli, Irvine 3rd, Sato 4th, Webber 5th, and Young 6th. But we've also got Frentzen and Benoldi, who've done a lap and then have parked the cars. Panis out on track, you're looking at him at the moment. De La Rosa and Salo in the Toyota, and Juan Pablo Montoya, 4 times in a row on pole, looking for his 5th consecutive pole. He is out on track as well.
Unfortunately, Webber has stopped somewhere in the middle part of the racetrack. You're on board with Panis then, heading down to the Nürburgring chicane, doing about 175, and it's slightly unsighted, but just clip those curves. It's very smooth, the one on the left, and pretty easy going, really. And now you've got to get in very, very early. It's a strange line into that corner. It takes you a long time to find the right way around that. It's got a silly name. It's called 180 degree, and it's a silly corner, but you cannot lose a lot of time in it. And they're sweeping through Imola then and getting it over to the left-hand side immediately for Chateaudun, and he's lost it. He's missed it completely. He's been around here thousands of times because he drove for Ligier all those years, the factory base down there at Turn 1. Panis knows this track better than anybody else in the world, and he will not be proud of himself getting that corner so badly wrong.
Panis crosses the line to go 5th. Out on track at the moment, Juan Montoya is the fastest man we've seen so far. And here is the Colombian, 26-year-old Juan Pablo Montoya, who really has turned Formula One on its head this year, certainly insofar as qualifying is concerned. If only Michelin would provide him with a tyre which would do something on a Sunday afternoon, be consistent and last consistently for lap after lap, so that he could challenge, and his teammate could challenge Michael Schumacher, then we would really see something. But at the moment, Montoya up on Barrichello's best time. This is Michelin's best effort then to get themselves on pole position there. Headquarters is just 100 kilometres away from here. as Montoya comes down into this very slow final section. Nips in, grabs some right-hand block, chucks it at the line, a 1:12.714, but we're going to see quicker than that.
Yeah, and he'll go quicker than that too. It was a good lap until the very last corner. Then he seemed to sort of be in suspended animation, didn't he? That's Webber returning to the pit. His main car parked out on track somewhere. We haven't seen it. But Montoya definitely lost a tenth or two in that last corner. But other than that, it looked a solid lap. And I think it confirms that Barrichello's first lap was actually a bit disappointing.
Ralf Schumacher's also going well, but not as quickly as his teammate. He's going to be at least half a second off Juan Montoya at the end of this lap, unless he can do something very special in the final couple of corners. Next season, when we come back to Magny-Cours, this whole sequence here is going to change. They're going to lengthen it by 400 metres and make this last corner into a better overtaking zone. And Schumacher did indeed make up quite a lot in the final part of that lap. The last sector was good for him, so just over a tenth slower. As we look at David Coulthard, who, Martin, has been tremendously competitive so far this weekend, fastest on Friday, and also both McLarens looking quite strong this morning.
Yeah, second and third they were this morning too, so it's a track I think they enjoy. Coulthard especially, having won here before, I know he very much likes the layout of this racetrack, and they do seem to have found a bit of extra pace, I think, especially for qualifying. So McLaren's really, I think, edging further and further into the game now, certainly in terms of Williams. Frankly, the Ferrari's in another league.
Yeah, the McLaren's certainly getting a lot closer to the pace of Williams and uses its rear tyres more gently than the Williams does, which often is crucial in the race. Ted, what can you tell us?
Just down at Jaguar, James, I think you've seen Pedro de la Rosa stop on the track. He's actually conked out just at the end of the pit lane, but crucially he couldn't push the car back into the pit lane himself so that mechanics could try and fix the problem. But anyway, he's going to have to take to the spare, which is set up for Eddie Irvine. Just to update you on Mark Webber, he came over the radio, said the car just conked out. He thinks it's the engine. He is in the spare, which is set up for him.
And just to remind you, there's a white line to fill in what Ted is saying there. There's a white line at either end of the pit lane that says this is the pit. This is the beginning and the end. And mechanics are not allowed outside of those zones. This is to stop the good old days where mechanics would go out onto the racetrack with a can of fuel and a bag of spanners to try to fix the cars. And they are not, unless if you can get the car into that zone, they can pull it all the way down the pit lane and get you started again. But unfortunately, as Ted was telling us, De La Rosa outside that zone and unable to move the car himself.
Michael Schumacher out on track. Also out there is Jenson Button and Nick Heidfeld. We've got Kimi Räikkönen and David Coulthard out on track as well now. So with the exception of Jacques Villeneuve, who is currently in the pits, Fisichella will not be taking part in the session, and Frenchman Benoldi will be taking no more part in the session. We've got everybody out on track now and getting the laps in, getting at least one good lap in before who knows what the track temperature might do. But Michael Schumacher, well, qualifying has not really been his strong suit recently. He's failed to get himself on the front row of the grid in 4 of the last 5 Grand Prix, which, if you think about the kind of season he's having of lifting trophies and spraying champagne bottles at the end of a Sunday afternoon, seems almost astonishing, really. But qualifying just seems to have got away from him a little bit recently.
De La Rosa still jogging back then. And he will have to, I would imagine they reminded him, he had to go and be weighed. That's what he'll be doing now. And look, Schumacher up by a fraction of a second down at Adelaide hairpin, but the real tester are these middle chicanes. Just watch the way he launches the car in, just how hard that Ferrari gets straight back on the throttle pedal. Incredible amount of rear grip they've got, and that's what makes them so strong in the race as well. I think they have a confidence in the car that they know the back end's not going to step out on them, and a full 0.3 of a second up now then. And we know Barrichello in the sister car did not have a particularly strong first lap, and I think we're about to see Michael Schumacher smash the qualifying record. Just one little unsighted and difficult chicane, which he got totally and utterly wrong. Dropped the back end on the way in and never had chance to recover. Will cut the beam, goes third, but that will be taken away from him. That time, I'm sure, will be taken away from him. And a cloud of dust outside our commentary box window as Michael Schumacher got it wrong when it most mattered.
And just after he'd said he was about to smash the qualifying lap record, the curse of Murray has been passed off. Kimi Raikkonen, though, is out on track. It's clearly very slippery out there at the moment. We've seen a number of cars spinning around the place over the last couple of days, and as I said before, the hotter it gets, the slippier it gets. Raikkonen, though, has looked very tidy. This is a good lap from Kimi Raikkonen, but fifth, well, I'm sure he would have expected a little bit more than that. Montoya still fastest then. Ralf Schumacher second. Michael Schumacher third as Coulthard cuts the beam and goes into third place and drops Michael Schumacher, but we believe that that time will be disallowed, obviously, because he cut across the gravel trap. He's currently shown in fourth anyway. Barrichello fifth, Raikkonen sixth, Trulli seventh, Sato eighth, De La Rosa ninth. Jenson Button, his first lap, not very good, a 1:14.074. That's only good enough for 12th place. And here's another look at what happened to Michael.
Yeah, he got it up on the curb, didn't he? And he lost the back end on turning. It's completely unsighted. It's an act of blind faith turning a Formula One car into there. It looks easy from here, doesn't it? But he lost the back end on the way through, got it all out of shape on top of the curb, and then the corner weights, then the weight was transferring around the car, and he simply had to keep steering into it to keep the car at least pointing forwards, and inevitably ran out of space and ran out of talent there just as he was about to put in the fastest ever lap of Manicourt in qualifying trim.
What do you call it? The dominance of ambition over addition, I believe. Louise, you're in the pits.
Yeah, I'm down outside the McLaren garage. Kimi Raikkonen was expecting him back in a minute. He was looking very smooth out on the track. Not quite the case in the pit lane, actually, when he went out to do that lap. He actually clipped a photographer as he was leaving the garage. Now, the photographer's fine, I'm pleased to say, but he did take his camera halfway down the pit lane before it fell off the rear wing. It didn't seem to have protected his performance, and as I say, the photographer's okay.
It's a very narrow pit lane here, has to be said. Probably the narrowest in the world, I'd imagine. Spa runs it pretty close, but compared to some of the pit lanes, for example in Malaysia, where you could almost get lost, they're so wide, here it's really nip and tuck down there. In fact, coming out of the pit garage, often you can't get enough lock-on to turn straight out of the garage itself, which is why Raikkonen, along with all the other drivers, you get the lock-on as soon as you can coming out of the pit garage. You tend to scoop up a few people with you if you're not careful.
Schumacher's time has been deleted from our computers, so he's yet to get himself into the race. You're looking at the Ferrari timing stand there. Jean Todt on the left and a chap called Stefano Domenicali. There he is on the right, the young fellow. He's my hot tip. I reckon he's the guy that Ferrari are grooming to take over from Jean Todt when he retires, in all likelihood, at the end of the 2004 season. A very smart operator, Domenicali. Lived a number of years in America, speaks perfect English. Respected by the other teams. I know McLaren and Williams have a very, very high regard for him. And he's recently, very quietly, been promoted to sporting director, as Todd has been elevated up the Ferrari hierarchy himself. And it'll be very interesting to see how Domenicali is able to carry on the baton in the future.
He is highly respected everywhere. I just wonder if he's a bit too nice. He's a very nice man, and I wonder if he's really, you fly with the crows, you get shot at, and nothing's more true than that in Formula One, and you certainly need to be pretty tough about it. Barrichello then is on a much better second attempt.
Indeed he is, a 10th up on Juan Montoya, and if he doesn't mess the last chicane up, he might well grab the pole away from Williams. Rubens Barrichello has been driving superbly of late, absolutely wonderfully. He does cover tape, and Rubens Barrichello moves it down the margin to a 1:12.552. And really, Martin, ever since Austria, all season he's been driving well, but particularly since Austria, he went out there and he beat the pants off Michael that weekend. And they did that team orders thing, and somehow he was empowered by that. It seemed to elevate him, and he's been driving like a wizard ever since.
I think the car sticks so well at the back, James. It suits his right foot braking style. And Michael likes a car that's alive. He can get the best out of a car that's all over the show more than anybody else in the world. But Rubens, I think this car just suits his driving style, and he really, has had the upper hand on Michael now for most of the qualifying sessions, as you say, since back in May.
Eddie Irvine, though, up into 6th place. What a terrific lap that was by the Irishman. And, everyone's talking about this being his final half-season, possibly in Formula One. Certainly, if he can draw out a few performances from the Jaguar like this, then maybe he might extend his stay. Rubens Barrichello then, with 35 minutes of the qualifying session remaining. Michael Schumacher yet to set a time. Rubens Barrichello on provisional pole ahead of Montoya. Ralf Schumacher third, Coulthard fourth, Raikkonen fifth, and Irvine in 6th place. Qualifying hour Grand Prix, and Jenson Button, about whom much will be said later this afternoon when Renault come to announce their driver lineup for 2003, and he isn't in it, comes across the line and jumps up into 4th place, and one senses that he would love to just send a little message to the Renault timing stand, to Flavio Briatore and the rest of the Renault management, by blowing Jarno Trulli's doors off here this weekend. So far this season, it's 7-3 in Trulli's favour in qualifying. And you have to say on Saturdays, Trulli has done the better job, but on Sundays, no doubt Button's done the better job.
Well, Button's just done a great lap, that's for sure. The fastest man of anybody so far in the final sector. Found a half a second through there, which is a lot to find in a Formula One car over his previous best effort. Button then up into 4th. So we have 3 Brits in the top 8. Irvine, I think, a revelation really in this qualifying session. Thank goodness the Jaguar appears to have some extra pace, and he's in 8th place at this time. But Montoya then smashes once again that qualifying record, and a 1:12.3. Tremendous effort. Be nice to see a little bit of a replay of some other parts of that lap if we can, but really something spectacular from Montoya, and Ralph cannot match it, but goes 3rd.
Yes, Ralph's not been able to match Montoya in qualifying much this season. It's 6-4 in Montoya's favour, and he really has taken the baton over in that team. But Montoya's first sector wasn't all that clever actually on that lap, so one feels he could go quicker again. Certainly I feel this is one of these qualifying hours that's just going to go forward towards the pole. The journey to the pole, if you like, is going to be taken in small steps with 3 or 4 guys, Barrichello, Montoya, Michael Schumacher, and possibly even Ralf Schumacher as well, just nibbling away as they get closer and closer to the magic 1:11 barrier. 1:12.346 so far from Montoya on provisional pole. Barrichello 2nd, Ralf 3rd, Button 4th, Coulthard 5th, and Trulli 6th at the moment, with 31 minutes of the session still to go.
4 drivers then not in the race at the moment. Frentzen and Bernoldi in the 2 Arrows, who we believe don't want to be in the race, or are not allowed to be in the race. Michael Schumacher had his time taken away for jumping the gravel trap, despite doing a 1:12.9. It was not by taking to the racetrack. And Fisichella, who, as James pointed out earlier on after his big accident this morning, is not taking any further part in this Grand Prix weekend. So right now, there are 18 cars in the race. Alex Young has just crept in 107% time with his 1:16.9, even though he's 2.1 seconds behind his teammate at this time.
But it's interesting, Mark, it's conceivable then, isn't it, if Fisichella's still feeling a bit Pat and Mick tomorrow, that we might actually start the Grand Prix with only 19 cars, because clearly both Arrows won't take any part, and possibly Fisichella as well. So we can't really afford for Alex Young to fall outside the 107%. At the moment, he's about half a second inside it, so unless Mr. Schumacher or Mr. Montoya do something utterly spectacular, Young is probably in the race, and it looks as though we should safely start with 19 cars, provided that Fisichella doesn't race. If he does, we'll have 20.
Now Michael Schumacher's got to respond, got to put a time on the board, and Montoya really has moved the target supremely well at a 1:12.3. I think Michael Schumacher should have the ability to beat that, and we haven't really been able to compare. He was about a 10th down at the first sector, so before he was very, very quick through this middle part. Will he be edging up on Montoya coming through? Yes, indeed he is. Look, he's a couple of tenths up with a stunning middle sector. So Schumacher, I can't say it again, can I? He's about to take provisional pole. Last time we said that, he took immediately to the gravel trap to throw it all away, and this is where it happened. Turns in somewhat more cautiously this time, and just tremendous acceleration, just that little short spurt, and over the line. Indeed, he just does it. Look, 1/500th of a second, sorry. Michael Schumacher certainly pulled something out of the bag, but you can't help but feel there's more there yet.
Yes, 5/100ths of a second up on Juan Montoya. It's a tremendous battle for pole position here at Magny-Cours. We've got half an hour of it left, and both Schumacher and Montoya have both completed 2 runs now, so they both have 2 left. 4 flying runs each. That's basically the order of the day here, as we look at Kimi Räikkönen coming to cut across the beam, and he goes up into 3rd place, underlining again with the fastest 3rd sector we've seen so far today that McLaren are very much in the hunt here at Magny-Cours. He's just a 10th off Montoya and 2/10 off Michael Schumacher.
That was a cracking lap from Räikkönen, wasn't it? Can Coulthard respond to that? He's done his personal best first sector through the Nürburgring chicane. That's the 180 corner. Looks neat and tidy. He's like Jenson Button. He has a very specific driving style, and wherever Button might go in the future, he's certainly going to need a car that suits his driving style, as does David Coulthard. And he's not done a personal best through the middle sector. So currently P7 is David Coulthard. He may just squeeze a little bit up the grid, but it's not going to do what he needs to do. It certainly, I don't think, is going to put him ahead of his teammate, who's currently in third.
Well, slightly unsighted there by Michael Schumacher, diving into the pit lane. Coulthard goes through into 6th place, so he's 3 places below his teammate Raikkonen. And well, currently in qualifying this season, it's 4-6 in Raikkonen's favour. 6-4, I should say. Raikkonen up, and more or less the same as it was last season between David Coulthard and Mika Häkkinen. That's how well Kimi Raikkonen has been going in qualifying throughout the 2002 season. Come race day, it's been a bit of a different story for the young Finn. He's had 6 retirements this season, and he's had the lion's share of the unreliability in the McLaren Mercedes squad, but nevertheless a terrific short performance from him. Nick Heidfeld in the Sauber, currently down in 14th place, and that's good enough to lift him up into 12th place. Who is going well, who's out of position? Jenson Button slipped down to 7th then with that time from David Coulthard. Jarno Trulli is behind Button though, and that's certainly a battle we will keep an eye on. Eddie Irvine is still in the top 10 with the Jaguar in 9th place. His teammate De La Rosa is 11th, and Takuma Sato, I have to say, is doing a splendid job in the Sole Jordan out there, with Fisichella not taking part in qualifying today after that accident. There is Takuma Sato, and he is still in the top 10 himself.
I think he's really moved on a lot this last 2 or 3 races, Sato. Certainly doing a much more solid performance. We were getting rather used to seeing him in the wall, weren't we? But I have to say, he really seems to have found the way with this Jordan car.
Apparently, Louise was telling me the other day that Giancarlo Fisichella actually took him to one side and had a sort of an arm around the shoulder conversation with him and said, listen mate, when I first came into Formula One, I was doing the same things as you. I was making mistakes, I was overdriving, I was pushing too hard. Just chill out a bit, and it seems to have worked, because Sato is certainly driving a lot better, and in fact out-qualified Fisichella 2 weeks ago at Silverstone. Ted.
James, Giancarlo Fisichella, while you're talking to him, he's actually back in the paddock now. He's at the Jordan Motorhome enjoying a plate of pasta. I'm told that he can't actually remember anything about the accident earlier this morning, and it's for that reason that Sid Watkins has said, no way can you take part in this session. I think in rugby, James, if you get concussion, you're out for 2 weeks, aren't you? And of course, in the German Grand Prix, which is in a week's time, maybe Fisichella won't be fit for that. Of course, Jordan now don't have a test driver, so there's rumour that they could ask John Alesi if he fancies driving that Jordan in the Hockenheimring, just a one-off.
Alesi Schmalesi. Step forward, Mr. Brundle. I'm sure you could step into that, Jordan.
I think I'd have to lose a few kilos in the next 4 days somehow if I was going to do that. But yeah, I believe Fisichella will be in the car frame. I think it's a precaution. But it was a nasty accident because there was a kind of a rebound effect where he went into the tyres, and that sort of secondary thing as it bounced back out, and that's the bit that really hurts. Your head is still going forwards, and you get a secondary action on it, and it does knock you around a bit. It was a very, very nasty accident, and he was so lucky this morning. He just ran into the end of a block of tyres, and a few more metres down the racetrack, and he'd have been straight into the wall, and I think he could well have been nursing some very sore, if not broken legs. Coulthard studying the data inside the car. He's got to find 0.3 of a second to match his teammate somehow and get up onto the second row.
This is Jenson Button's 3rd qualifying run of the afternoon. He's currently still in 7th place on the grid. At the moment, this is not a better lap than he's done so far. His 1st and 2nd sector times are not an improvement. So unless he can find something a little bit special in the final sector, out of Chateau d'Eau as he goes now down the hill towards the final chicane and the Lycée corner, just these last few corners, if he can find something here, he might improve. Otherwise, it's going to stay 7th place for Jenson. He does. He finds a little Calcachos in the final corners, and he's up to 6th. Great effort by Jenson. He's really trying, isn't he?
I think he's got a point to make, hasn't he? So Button really, he knows this afternoon he's going to be announced to be booted out of the team, and he wants to say, hey, hang on a minute, don't forget about me. But Michael Schumacher on provisional pole then by a fraction from Montoya. Raikkonen 3rd, Barrichello 4th, Ralf Schumacher 5th. Jenson Button just creeps up into the top 6.
Just a little over 21 minutes left in this qualifying session for tomorrow's French Grand Prix here at Magny-Cours, and you're riding on board with Jarno Trulli, teammate of Jenson Button, currently down in 8th place. and matching Jensen exactly for lap time. So there's a real battle between these two as to who is going to come out top Renault driver at the end of the qualifying session. On board again with Trulli as he launches it out of Chateau d'Eau.
He's got a chance, I think, James, if he can have a good run. That was a bit bouncy, wasn't it? But he kept forward motion going. He might just pop it up in front of his teammate, but he doesn't. He stays on a 13.0 and bolted down there in 8th place.
Michael Schumacher then provisionally on pole position if you're just joining us, a 1:12.287 he set earlier on, but it's nothing in it between himself and Juan Montoya, and indeed Kimi Raikkonen and in the McLaren, and Rubens Barrichello very, very close at the front, just 3 or 4 tenths of a second separating the top 4, and it's even closer in the midfield between 8th and 17th. There is a second separating them as we ride on board with Olivier Panis, and he is currently in that peloton, for want of a better word, down in 16th place, and this is an improvement for him as team boss Dave Richards watches. Speaking of pelotons, don't forget to tune into ITV2. Our coverage of the Tour de France is going on at the moment, and a tremendous competition it is too, with Lance Armstrong in the yellow jersey at the moment. But Olivier Panis, well, he won't be wearing the maillot jaune at the end of qualifying, but can he get himself into the top 10 at the very least? After a strong performance at Silverstone 2 weeks ago, he goes up to 12th, a terrific lap by Olivier Panis. He's 3 places ahead of his teammate Villeneuve at the moment.
Yeah, BAR not having a stellar weekend, that's for sure, despite their points at the last Grand Prix. At the moment then, Panis 12th, Villeneuve 15th, and Mika Salo then you're now watching, he's down in 14th. Toyota looked strong again yesterday, but I do think they run less fuel on a Friday than the other teams, but at least Salo improved his time, but not his position.
I had a word with Salo yesterday and said, why is it that some places we go to, you're blindingly fast with this car, and other places you're just not on the pace, you're like 15th, 16th in the grid? And he said, we haven't got a clue. We really don't know. It's only our first year in Formula One, and we need to understand this, because obviously we've got whatever's good about this car, we need to build into next year's car, and whatever's bad about it, we need to take out. But we're really struggling to understand, as one of the Williams is Juan Montoya goes across to start his 3rd flying lap of the afternoon, and you can see by the body language of the car that he is really pushing hard.
Well, he's got a sniff of his 5th consecutive pole position. That's the exit then of Estoril corner. Now you take the line of least resistance to be on the left-hand side into Adelaide hairpin. Brakes at 105 metres, touches the apex white line. That was perfect, look, and he is a fraction up. But as ever, it's this middle sector. Let's stay on board hopefully with him as you go through Nürburgring. Straight back on the throttle pedal, no problem at all. Just be careful not to snatch the inside left wheel under braking, no problem. Tremendous traction then from Montoya. Isn't that car working well? It appears that his work rate behind the wheel is so low, he's letting the car do all the work, but he's lost a fraction somewhere. Difficult to see where, wasn't it? Because it looked so good. Turned in very early actually for Chateau d'Eau, but seems to have got some good grip in the middle, but had to get on the power a little bit later. There's that unsighted chicane, the big curves, launch the car, but be ready for this last part and just muller those curves on the outside, and he goes pole.
Yes! 1/10 faster than Michael Schumacher. He talked about this being a journey to the pole, taken in small steps, and it ain't over yet. 17 minutes are remaining in this qualifying hour. Michael Schumacher has still got 2 runs left. Montoya himself has still got 1 run left. Ralf Schumacher is 9/100ths down on his teammate's new provisional pole. He's on his 3rd run of the afternoon, and Rubens Barrichello is out as well, about to start his 3rd run. So it's really hotting up here in the battle for pole for tomorrow's French Grand Prix. What can Ralf Schumacher do as he goes into the last corner? Slightly wide, and a lost time there. Yes, he drops down, and it doesn't give him. It's a slight improvement on what he managed before, but it loses him 3/10 of a second relative to his teammate Louise.
Well, Ralf Schumacher may not quite have made it, but what an impressive performance from Juan Pablo Montoya. Made also when you realise that unlike his competitors at McLaren and his competitors at Renault, he is on the harder tyre. Now, you would ordinarily expect that to be slightly slower over a single qualifying lap. It is more durable in the race, and that's why the team have gone with it. But what an impressive performance.
Yeah, but they chose the harder tyre at the Nürburgring, didn't they? And they had and it was hopeless for them there. But what we're actually talking about here is harder and softer, but they're all very soft. It's just in the soft end of the scale. One is slightly, I think, less soft than the other. Hard is not the right expression, I think, that the tyre manufacturers use for their compounds. But Montoya, whatever tyre he's got on, he certainly made it work well. Great for us to be on board with him as he was sort of delivering up the current pole position lap, to see it was just ebbing and flowing, wasn't it? He was a fraction up, a fraction down, made a tiny error at Chateau d'Eau, and then nailed it through the last two corners to snatch that provisional pole position. Barrichello then out for another attempt, currently in 5th place. I don't think that represents the time, and that's what I was talking about earlier on at 180. It's so easy if you keep braking right into the heart of the corner, inside tyre locks, and you just slide away from where you need to be.
Michael Schumacher coming out as well. Rubens Barrichello very close, and you can see just how close it is between all these drivers. 5, 6, 7 hundredths of a second on the split times. That's what we're talking about here. It's nickels and dimes. But you could also see that Montoya was just bristling with serious purpose when he went out for that lap. He was really, the car was right on edge. As Barrichello comes through and improves slightly, he goes up into 4th place, and that puts him ahead of Kimi Raikkonen. So it's Montoya, Michael Schumacher, Ralf Schumacher, Barrichello, Raikkonen, Button ahead of David Coulthard. Fantastic performance by him, and Coulthard slipping away. Is this going to get him back ahead of Button again? Yes, it does. So Button slides back into 7th place, but he's still ahead of his teammate Jarno Trulli in the sister Renault. Eddie Irvine going very well for Jaguar, still in the top 10. Takuma Sato is still 10th. No one's knocked him off that perch. Pedro de la Rosa, though, has been replaced in 11th spot by Felipe Massa, who is again outperforming Nick Heidfeld in the sister Sauber. And de la Rosa appears to have stopped out on circuit somewhere, Martin. Once again, that's the second mechanical problem that de la Rosa's had this afternoon, because we saw him breaking down just the other side of the pit lane exit. So it's some sort of misfire apparently out on sector 1, but that presumably is the end of de la Rosa's afternoon.
Less than half second covers the top 6 runners. I don't think we've seen the end of this yet, James. And I think Michael Schumacher is out on track then to try to reclaim that provisional pole position. He is fed up, I would imagine, with Montoya just sneaking it away from him. And in the last 4 Grand Prix, Montoya currently holds that position. Michael Schumacher very slowly building up, ready to launch an attack. Look, just he's coasting. And then he'll take a very easy line through the last corner to straighten the car immediately and just hammer the throttle. Gets it in a straight line, gives you best traction, and now he'll attack the racetrack. And you'll give up a little bit on the first 2 corners because your tyres and pressures are down, the temperatures and pressures are down a little bit. But later in the lap, those crucial chicanes, the tyres will be just coming into their peak.
It's all about managing the car over a single lap. It might look simple, but it's not simple. It's about getting it all right for the various different corners, and Schumacher is not getting it right at the moment. He's 6/100ths of a second down on Montoya, but this Ferrari is very good in sectors 2 and 3. Look how it's just nailed to the ground, the downforce. Look at the way it changes direction. Look at the way he gets it up over the curve. It's amazing, but he's wide there, isn't he?
He is indeed, but he got out of shape. He was just way too deep over that curve in the Nürburgring chicane. We'll see the split time coming up any time now, and he's still faster. He just carried so much speed, and now, as I was saying earlier, now the tyres are really hooked up. He gave up some in that first sector to get the tyres working through to the end of the lap, so you should expect him to be mighty through here now. Surely he's going to take away that provisional pole. Does he? No! By a fraction. Look at that. 900ths of a second. Where did that go?
I have no idea. That's what Montoya's asking. Where on earth did that go? But hey, Montoya's not complaining. He's still on provisional pole position. And you just have to say that lap just throughout, it just seemed like it wasn't quite going to be the one, wasn't it? Just that little bit where he bounced up over the curb and got out of shape.
Well, the odd thing is that the first and third sectors looked neat and tidy and composed, and he was slower. And the middle sector looked completely ragged and out of control. He set the fastest sector of anybody by a quarter of a second. So a bizarre lap, but it's so difficult around here. You think you've hooked up those perfect turn-ins to those unsighted chicanes, and you're just losing a fraction, and it's difficult to put your finger on exactly how and where.
Well, breathless stuff here at Magny-Cours. 11 minutes to go in the qualifying hour, and well, they're all pretty much level now. They've all done 3 runs, and and it means they've all got 1 run to go. We're trying to get some information at the moment about the track temperature, whether it's changing, whether the track is getting warmer or cooler, whether we're likely to see faster times in the remaining 10 minutes. But it's certainly been a tremendous qualifying session so far. And if somebody could hook up their best sector times, because nobody has done the best sector in all 3 sectors. Montoya's done the best 3rd one, Michael's done the best middle one, Barrichello's done the best 1st one. So the actual ideal time, if one person had done all of those, would be 1:11.8, which is 0.3 of a second faster than provisional pole at the moment.
Michael Schumacher, remember I sort of groaned when he was going through the Nürburgring chicane. The stewards have found the need to mention it on the computer here, that car 1 missed the apex of turn 7 at Nürburgring, and from a different angle we might see that effectively he cut across the inside of the corner. He was certainly significant. The significant part of his car was off the racetrack there, so whether they'll take his time away or not, we don't know, but I don't think it will affect his grid slot anyway. He'll still be in 2nd place.
So this is the calm bit now. Just that once we get within 10 minutes of the last part of the hour, and everyone will suddenly go out again in about 5 or 6 minutes time, and it'll be absolute pandemonium out on track. But the good news for all those speed merchants out there that want to try and take on Juan Montoya is that the track temperature is coming down. It's come down by 2 degrees in the last 5 minutes, and who knows, it may come down some more. A little bit of cloud cover possibly just creeping in there. This is a good time to be out on track, and that is Jenson Button out on track at just the right moment.
Yes, indeed. As we've already said, he will be announced as not being used by Renault next year in the team. And the trouble then, James, is that the minute you're out of a team for the following year, you start to be an outsider. They won't use you for testing because they don't want you to take to other teams any knowledge of their development parts, and you start getting less and less information. It's a horrible feeling when you're leaving a team, either when you've been booted out or when you've signed what you perceive to be a better contract. Suddenly, from walking in every door and being the hero to everybody in the team, you're slightly cold-shouldered, and it's a very negative way to go around the world and go motor racing.
Well, I've no doubt that Jenson Button fans watching this on television will be writing to the Renault headquarters to make their feelings clear about what's happened with Jenson this season. He certainly doesn't seem to have done anything wrong in the car. Obviously some politics behind the scenes. Where is Jenson going, I hear you cry? Well, he did say yesterday that he knows where he's going, and he'll announce it shortly. Certainly the candidates, Sauber, British American Racing, a possibility. Toyota maybe, who knows? Certainly it's not going to be a move forward up the grid from the looks of things. It's probably going to be a move backwards, and that's not really what Jenson needed for his career.
No, he's gone from 2nd best team Williams to 4th best team Renault to, quite clearly, he'll have to go to a team further down the pecking order at this time. That was his final attempt, Jenson Button. His 12 laps are now complete, and in fact that was his slowest run of the day. So he remains 7th at best, but still a quarter of a second ahead of his teammate Trulli.
So of course the $10 million question is, was that his slowest run of the day because of him or because the track is getting slower? Well, theoretically it's getting cooler, so it should be getting a little bit faster, but we'll find out if anybody starts to set better times than they have so far in the hour. 7 minutes remaining of this session. This is Takuma Sato, who is still in 10th place on the grid, and if he can keep it there, I think that's definitely going to be his best qualifying position of the season. Indeed it is, by some margin. His best so far has been 14th, so a terrific effort from him. And Eddie Irvine in 9th place with Jaguar, I mean, that's a million miles better than anything he's done so far this season. He's been 19th, 20th, 13th was his best so far. So obviously Eddie Irvine turning things around as well.
Disappointing day for some of the Bridgestone runners, certainly in qualifying trim. We've got Massa 11th in the Sauber, Heidfeld 13th, Villeneuve 14th, Panis 15th. Some cars there that we've really expecting to see going much better than that. And indeed, Michael Schumacher has lost his 1 minute 12.212 for jumping across the inside of the Nürburgring chicane, but he does remain 2nd. That is replaced with a 1 minute 12.287. So 2 times this afternoon, Michael Schumacher has lost his lap time. Once for quite clearly going through the gravel trap and missing the final corner altogether, and interestingly penalised for really just slightly short-cutting a chicane.
Takuma Sato goes through in a 13.580. That's 0.04 of a second slower than his best lap of the afternoon, so he does not improve as we're looking at the other Renault out on track.
There's lots of green painted tarmac areas. You have to say to yourself, if you're penalised for cutting the inside of the Nürburgring chicane, why are you not penalised for going very wide in the last corner and also using an extra bit of tarmac? What is the difference, really?
Well, I believe they had a discussion about this in the drivers' briefing on Friday, because certainly Mika Salo was one of the drivers who was complaining that if you actually straight line the chicanes here, which they have filled in with this green concrete this year, you shorten the lap by about 50 or 60 yards. So he said, surely that's not fair, and I gather that they had a conversation about that on Friday afternoon. So clearly this is what's going on here, is some sort of knock-on effect from that. 5 minutes to go then. Rubens Barrichello out on track. He's the first of the front runners, the possible pole sitters for tomorrow's Grand Prix. He's the first one to go out, and is he going to just steal a march on the others?
Massa moves up into 10th place on a 1:13.5. Eddie Irvine is on a hot lap out there, improves his time but stays 9th. So Irvine has got a very good chance of qualifying for this French Grand Prix inside the top 10. Can Barrichello improve on 4th place? He'll be disappointed if he starts this race 4th. Once again takes a somewhat bizarre line around the 180-degree corner. We'll get another time check anytime soon. And he's a fraction up. He's had a good middle sector. He had a good first sector too. And look, that is the result. Very smooth. Rubens does have a very aggressive way of turning a Formula One car. He just launches the steering wheel into the corner. And what he's going to do is he goes over the line. The line is just around this final apex. Goes second, up onto the front row, out qualifying teammate Michael Schumacher. Pushed down to 3rd is Michael. There he is. He can see that information for himself. So Montoya remains on pole, but Barrichello now sitting alongside him again.
Yes, and only once in the last 5 races, remember, Michael Schumacher has actually started on the front row of the grid, amazing as it seems. Quick shot there of the Arrows garage. If you're wondering why we haven't seen them out on track, they did go out earlier. They set 2 times that were outside the 107% rule. That's all they did, 3 laps, and then came back in again. And those are the only 3 laps that both cars have done all weekend, due to obviously some serious problems within the team and some negotiations going on between the team owners and major investors Morgan Grenfell. But with 3 minutes of the qualifying session still to go, Michael Schumacher has got to do something to get himself back onto the front row of the grid, because at the moment it's Montoya and Barrichello on row 1 for tomorrow's Grand Prix, and then the 2 Schumacher brothers, Michael and Ralph, 3 and 4, Raikkonen and Coulthard as you were in row 3, and Button and Trulli in row 4. That's the way it's shaping up at the moment. Not too many people setting faster sector times, or indeed faster laps, than they managed earlier in the hour, so it's going to take something a little bit special, I think. Rubens Barrichello found that something special just a moment ago to improve. Can Michael do it? Can Ralph do it? Can indeed Montoya do it? And just push the margin down below 1:12. At the moment, the 1:12.117 is provisional pole.
Raikkonen about 2/10 down on his best in the first sector, and he remains a quarter of a second down on current pole position. He needs just 0.06 of a second to get himself ahead of Ralf Schumacher. Now he'll have to throw caution to the wind in this final sector. He wants to get onto the second row of the grid. A lot of the big runners now on the racetrack. Raikkonen over the line and does get on the second row of the grid with a 12.24. Wow, that's just over a 10th off pole.
And it's faster than Michael Schumacher. Kimi Raikkonen, tremendous speed there. As you look at the garage of Giancarlo Fisichella, he is back at the racetrack, but as we heard from Ted before, he will not be taking part in the qualifying session, and due to the big accident he had this morning. Anyway, back to the on-track action. We have yet to have another lap from final lap from Juan Montoya. He's winding up for one at the moment. So too is Michael Schumacher, so is Ralf Schumacher, and so is David Coulthard. We don't know what order they're in out on the racetrack. We're hoping to find that out for you before the final laps begin, but it's going to be certainly a grandstand finish here in the qualifying hour at Magny-Cours.
Don't know why Rubens is running around. His 12 laps are absolutely up, but just wanted to get back into the pit garage, probably to see the final 1 minute and 10 seconds of action as they're out there. Raikkonen is finished. He's up in 3rd place, and That is Raikkonen coasting back into the pits, trying to find a way around the outside of Michael Schumacher. Schumacher treating his tyres as if they were pure qualifiers by just coasting around to the beginning of the lap and trying to imitate what he did last time of giving up a couple of tenths in the first sector to really have it all on song at the end.
So he's starting his lap now, but Juan Montoya is ahead of him on the racetrack. So we're going to keep an eye on both of them, which is going to be pretty difficult. But Montoya is ahead of Michael Schumacher, so maybe he can push the margin further away. Maybe Michael Schumacher will be able to do something about it. And Ralf Schumacher is ahead of both of them on the racetrack, but at the moment he is not quicker than Montoya. Montoya sets the fastest first sector of qualifying so far, unseen by us, but we're following Michael Schumacher. What has he done? Oh, he's 3/100ths out. Now what can happen in the rest of the lap? It's going to be very nip and tuck. It'd be lovely to have a quick look at what Montoya was up to at the same time as Michael, but 6 seconds of the session remaining. Well, thank you, Mr. Director. There we are, Juan Montoya. What's his middle sector been like? Because his first was the fastest so far. It's been his best so far, and he is a tenth up on his own provisional pole position. Into the final long right-hander at Chateau d'Eau. Launched the car down the hill up to about 160 miles an hour. Hit the brakes, flick it right, flick it left into the final chicane, and then just bung it at the final closing line. And is he going to get into the 11s? Yes, he does! 1:11.985. And what about Schumacher? Schumacher's into the final corner as well. Is this going to be faster? Is he in the 11s? Can he go quicker? No, he can't! Oh my word! What a great final few seconds here, qualifying for the French Grand Prix. Fabulous entertainment.
It was great, wasn't it? Michael Schumacher then once again just lost a fraction in the very, very last corner of the lap. For some reason, he just didn't find a way around there. Coulthard goes faster, but stays sixth, half second from pole. So it's Montoya then, the only man in the 1:11s, and just a new circuit record. Michael Schumacher second, Barrichello third then with that, so Raikkonen slipped back to fourth, Ralf Schumacher fifth, Coulthard, as I said, sixth, Button then remains in seventh, and and ahead of teammate Jarno Trulli. So Jenson Button out-qualifies Trulli, and Irvine, I'm very happy to say, in ninth in the Jaguar.
Yes, indeed. Let's just analyse these times a little bit. As you say, there's Jacques Villeneuve stopped out on track. He's 13th, 2 places below his teammate Olivier Panis. And in fact, they both in the end got ahead of Takuma Sato, who was dropped down to 14th. So that's unfortunate for the Jordan team, having lost Giancarlo Fisichella to that bad accident. But a great day for Jenson Button, who, as you say, gets ahead of teammate Trulli. And that's a little statement, isn't it, ahead of the press conference at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Kimi Raikkonen once again out-qualifying David Coulthard. Raikkonen 4th, Coulthard 6th. Heidfeld again getting the Sauber into the top 10 in 10th place, ahead of teammate Massa, who was 12th in the end. So the kind of natural order of things, in a way, was put back in place towards the end. But a poor day for the Toyota team down in with Salo 16th and Michelin 17th.
Yeah, that's a dismal showing from Toyota. They expected to be strong here, they said, because it's a very smooth track. They think their car's not well suited to a bumpy layout, and this is the smoothest track in the world by some margin. And they'll be very disappointed down there in 16th and 17th.
Well, a very happy Juan Montoya has his 5th consecutive pole position, his 6th of the season, and he has every intention tomorrow of spoiling Michael Schumacher's date with destiny.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks to James as well. Coming up, we hope to hear from Jenson Button. There's Tony.